Vishal said, my name is Sonsia Kolimo, and I'm a business transformation consultant. Any questions that you may have, you can put it in the Q&A during the course of this presentation, and I'll answer them at the ending of the presentation. All right. So what we're going to touch on is workflows for Dynamics GP. I'm currently running GP2018R2. And with workflows, we're going to get into basically how you're going to set up a workflow from scratch. So the first thing that you need to do, you need to be logged in as an administrator within the system. And then you need to navigate to workflow setup. Now within this area, you are going to enter your mail SMTP configuration settings. And this is going to allow you to receive emails via workflows. So whether it is a reminder email or whether it's to approve, reject, or delegate, you're going to be able to do that via the email that you receive and basically what it's actually set up for. Now, once you have configured the workflow setup, we need to configure your workflow calendar, because the workflow calendar allows you to input any holidays or vacations that you may be taking throughout the year, and therefore in calculating when a user is going to approve that workflow, it's going to keep in mind that those days aren't counted within the period that you have to approve. Yes, Jason, you can go ahead and ask me a question. Guys, I'm just waiting a response from one of the panelists. Sure. Now, the good thing about implementing workflows is that you are able to restrict what a user is able to approve, and it allows for tasks to be delegated to a specific user, and it allows for everything to be in an order. That way things don't fly under the rug. So you have specific steps in a workflow, and those steps are actually going to let you know what task you are responsible for. So thereby everyone has accountability within the system. All right. Any more questions before I move on? Okay, good. So with that said, we're going to move down to workflow calendars. And like I stated before, the workflow calendar is going to allow you to input whatever holidays or vacation days within the system. So it's going to actually block off those days and not incorporate it within the days that you have to approve a task. So for example, if it is you have to approve a task within 8 days, and your holidays actually fall within that 8-day period, it's not going to be accounted for. So I could put December the 25th as an example. All right, sorry, I need to change the calendar here first. So let's do that. Okay, so it's asking me, because Fabricam is set to 2017, it's asking me to use the year 2027, sorry. All right, so December 25th. Right? And we could put as much information here as we want in terms of block off days, and we can save that. Once that's saved, we need to actually set up a workflow. So in workflow maintenance, there are a couple of things to note. Within GP 2018, we were actually graced with 3 new workflows, and those workflows entail your general ledger account workflow. It also entails the receiving transaction approval workflow, and also purchasing invoice approval workflow. And within these workflows, we also have additional options that were added within the system. I would like to just make note of the taskbar up here. You are actually able to copy a previous workflow. So in the event that you have a wide range of workflow steps to create, the copy option is actually going to make it a lot easier for you. So for example, I currently have a purchase order approval workflow, which is set up here, and it's for the manager to approve anything that's $5,000 and over. So if it is I needed to actually create another step, instead of creating a new step or a new workflow, I could actually copy, and I could change this to CEO and say that this CEO can approve anything over $100,000, and I can save that. So the only change that I would actually need to make now is to come here at the extended line of the workflow and change the value here from $5,000. So I can change that it needs to be greater than the extended price right. And then we add. All right. So once we do this, we could save the next step. So like I said, you could copy as many steps as you want and build out your workflow. Now, with that said, there are many options within the workflow, and we're actually going to start off with talking about the workflow setup area. Right? So with the workflow setup, like I said, it allows you to be able to receive an email within your system. It allows you to approve. So by actually building out your workflows, once you approve any one of these steps, right now I only have one step created for my approver, which is John Doe. Once you have approved any one of these steps, you are able to receive a notification. And if you click on the arrow, you could set what you would like to receive a notification for, whether it is if the user, once I'm getting another question. Okay, so the workflows here are not the only workflows. So as I mentioned earlier, you have a whole suite of workflows, right? So you're having the financial, sales, purchasing, payroll, project, and administration. But in 2018, GP brought in those 3 new workflows that were added to the system, which is purchasing invoice, receive transactions, and general ledger. All right, so they kept in mind a lot of workflows for persons who would like to incorporate workflows into their daily routine. All right. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to jump in. That's fine. So back to the purchasing order approval workflow. If you select the actions, you are able to select what it is you would like to actually receive a email notification for. Currently, I have if a workflow is submitted and also if a workflow is approved, I would like to be able to receive a message in my email. You could also send a carbon copy to a user, an Active Directory user within the system. So once you have set up your notifications, you are now able to allow approvers to delegate tasks. Now, if you choose to allow an approver to delegate a task, you are able to select any user who is an Active Directory user to delegate those tasks to within the system. Any HR? No, currently we don't have any human resources workflows within the system, unfortunately. Any other questions before I continue? Okay. So I am currently set to allow approvers to delegate tasks. Option 3 would allow for persons to create a request, so to also be an approver within the workflow system. So if it is, I created the purchase order to be approved, I am considered an originator within the system. And if it is, I want to be able to approve a workflow or approve the workflow that I created, by selecting this option, it gives me that ability. So I could not only create the workflow, I could not only create the purchase order to be approved via the workflow, I could also go in within that workflow and approve it myself. All right, so users have that option. With option 4, always require at least one approver. So by selecting this option, it also prevents documents from going through without approval. So regardless of the steps that you may have, it's not going to go through without an approval. So for example, you may have a step that states your country is Trinidad, and you're going to let my user John approve it. And if it's the country is Jamaica, you're going to let my approver Tim approve it, for example. So if you did not check this checkbox to always allow at least one approver, and the document would go through if it doesn't fall in the category. So if the category was country Barbados, that doesn't fall into any of my steps that I had listed out. So by not checking this, it's going to just bypass and go on to the next approval step. So if it is you don't want anything to slip through the works, you can select this. So whether or not you did not include it in the steps, it's going to still at least allow an approver to have a look at it and approve it before it goes on. Last but not least, use alternate final approver. Now this approver allows you to define an alternate approver. So if I was to select this option, I could actually enter an Active Directory user within the system to be, and it could be anybody actually. All right, once they are an Active Directory user, you can add them, because the nice thing about GP workflows is that you don't have to log into the system, which I mean to log into GP. You don't have to do that to approve, reject, or delegate a task. You can do it straight from your email. Once you have that set up to receive notifications via your email, you can approve it right there without actually logging in and doing that. All right, but I'm not going to define any alternate approvers for this. So under the task overdue section, we see a couple of options. We see take no action, and that's self-explanatory. If it's overdue, nothing's gonna happen. If it's the second option, escalate to the next approver, it's gonna allow you to delegate to other individuals within the system. 3 is escalate to the next approver, and you can actually select who is the escalatee that you're going to escalate the overdue task for. And lastly, we have automatically reject any overdue task. So once the timeline has passed, if it is you were given 4 days to approve a task, if that 4 days has gone, you could reject it, which will automatically reject it in the system, and you would have to resubmit for approval once again. All right. Another thing to note, any purchase orders or any task that you want to set up for approval, once it's in the system prior from you activating a workflow, you would not be able to submit it to be within the workflow. Workflows work where you have to activate a workflow, and then anything subsequent to that, it's allowed to be within the workflow chain, and it's allowed for you to actually approve. Anything before, you're not going to be able to send it through to be approved, right? So that's something to note within your system. So make sure you always activate, because this step could be forgotten, because you could save the workflow without actually activating it. And you may start putting in your purchase orders, or trying to receive again something, and you realize that no one's being prompted to do anything, and that's because the workflow has not been active. Thereby, whatever you had created is not going to be incorporated into what you actually wanted to be approved. So we could go through a workflow step, and we could actually use the one that I pre-built. So this one, it's for my manager and my manager to approve a workflow, which is $5,000 and over. And this is under purchase orders, by the way. So under purchase order entry, I'm just going to create a quick purchase order. Right, so here you can see that my total value is $10,000. And once I save this, sorry. Once I save this and I bring back up my purchase order, it's currently not submitted. All right. Once I do submit the purchase order, and I click submit, and I bring back up my purchase order, it's going to let me know that it requires manager's approval and it's pending approval from John Doe. And based on the timeline that I gave, so let's just revisit the workflow. In workflow maintenance, right, my manager is John Doe. Right, and the time limit that John Doe has is 8 hours. He must approve it within 8 hours. So on my purchase order, here you would see, now today's Friday, so the system kept in mind, those are non-work days, because in my calendar, and I just want to go because I want y'all to see how it's tracked. In my calendar, my work days are Monday to Friday. So it kept in mind that Saturday and Sunday are not work days, and it calculates the 8 hours, which brings my approval date to the 29th at 9:26 a.m. Right, so that's when John has to approve it by. So the system is telling you all of this. It also allows you to recall the workflow. But before we recall, I should have received an email, right? And the reason I received this email is because I selected that I would like for tasks that are submitted, I would like to receive an email for that task. So it's telling me that I have been assigned a task for the manager's approval, all right, for the purchase order PO 2080. And I could approve, reject, or delegate. Now we're going to log in as John Doe. I'm just going to switch user. I'm going to log in as my John Doe user. And by logging in as John Doe, like I said, workflow works with Active Directory. So you don't actually have to be a user with any system. It works by the user that you're logged in as. So by me logging in as John Doe, I'm just going to log into GP. I should see that PO 2080 to be approved. So under my purchasing, we have a couple of tabs here. We would like to view the transactions under the purchase order. And by viewing the transactions under purchase order, you can see, review what was not submitted, what's pending approval, etc. So we would like to see if there are any purchase orders that are pending approval. And there is the purchase order that was created. And here you can see that we are logged in as the workflow user John Doe, and it's pending action, and this is our due date for us to approve it by. All right, we can double click on the line and it brings up the purchase order so we can see it in its entirety. All right, we could view the history. Right, so we could see that it was originated, a message was sent to approve it, right? It requires manager's approval by John Doe, and if the task is overdue, then nothing is going to happen, right? Because we set it to take no action. So to approve this task, we can click on the task to be approved. Click approve, we could send a message, approved, right? And select OK. So if it is we were to go back within and view the history, right, we can now see that it's approved, right? So John is actually going to bring up that PO. So under purchasing, purchase order entry, right? And it's actually going to tell you when the task was completed. And it shows that the manager approved it and what date and time the manager approved the task. If we were to recall the PO, we could go back into purchase order transactions. And our purchase order it tells you who it's recalled by, and it also tracks it within the history. It allows you to resubmit for approval. Right? And I receive another notification again stating that I need to approve this once again. Now I need to make note of something. So you guys, in order for you to approve via email, in order for you to approve, reject, or delegate via email, there's something called web services that needs to run within GP that allows for that approval, right? The web services are installed via your GP setup. And once that's installed, under your workflow setup area, you need to enable email actions to be able to approve, reject, or delegate via your web services. Any questions before I continue? Okay. So another thing with workflows, you are able to view a history report, which is actually a new feature within GP 2018. So under administration reports, we have a workflow history. Right? You could sort by workflow type, user, completion date, or due date. And you have sort option by ranges as well. Here we could select which class and workflow type that we want to sort by. For ours would be purchasing. Right, so you could sort by receivings, invoice, purchase order approval, and this is the one we're going to select. Insert, save. Right, and you could email these reports, all right, to anybody who would like to see a whole view of the history with the workflow. So that's good for your managers, so they could have a printout to actually see what occurred during the course of a particular period and for which workflow approval process. right? So you can either send the report as an embedded message in the body, or you could have it as an attachment. You could also accompany it with an additional follow-up message. And you can select OK. All right. So let's email. And here I have my workflow report. Well, it's showing up as the attachment is actually showing up as a web page, but nonetheless, it's basically the same thing. Like I said, you could either have it as an embedded message in the report. If you want it as an attachment, you'll be able to view it as a web page. And here you can see everything that happened for what particular purchase order number based on the workflow type. So you have the two purchase orders that I actually created within the system. This one I did previously, and this one I did with you guys. And here you can see all the information, the user that approved it, what action, what data was completed, and if they actually stayed within the stipulated time frame. All right. Let's go back to our workflow maintenance. Workflow setup, workflow maintenance. All right, so we have another option called email message setup. And the nice thing about this is this can be customized. So whereas you saw I received an email message, and that was basically generic and out of the box. So you do have a whole suite of emails, pre-built email messages to your disposal from workflow action completed. So if you want to see messages based on GL approvals, PO approvals, purchase receiving approvals, whichever one you are interested in receiving a message for can be customized to your liking. So like I said, currently this is out of the box, all right? It allows you to receive an email with the task deadline, the document number, company, purchase order number, vendor, etc. And it also allows you to input various fields onto the report, right? So if it is the report is lacking some sort of information, and most of the times you would hear users state that they want the report modified. It doesn't capture all the information that they would like. So in this screen is where that happens and where you can actually customize your report. So you can bring in document fields, and you could also bring in workflow fields And you can also have replies sent to selected users. If you have more than one user, or obviously we would input a semicolon after each email. Right, so this is a very useful feature. And once you have inputted a field onto the report, so if we wanted to input, let's see, vendor ID, vendor name. Okay, that's already there. So vendor ID, right? You can insert the vendor ID. It comes up here, and you can change this part of it. So wherever you see percentile, the name of the field and then percentile, it actually is reading from Dynamics GP, and that is what's going to bring in. So you could rename, before it was comments, but you could actually rename it to put vendor ID. And you can validate just to ensure, right, that everything matches and everything is fine before you actually save. Right, so once I save this, if it is I was to receive a notification for PO approval, right, so let's save this. And under workflow maintenance, purchase order, if my approval option under message, we have action completed. And here I can select my PO, customized PO that I would like to receive. So I could bring in the message by clicking on open. And I could select my workflow assigned PO approval document. And here you can see vendor ID. This is what I inputted a moment ago. And I click save. Right? I'm just showing that's what I am going to receive. So you could change this, and you could actually choose another document type. Right, so it's based on what emails you would like to receive within the system. So that's a nice feature that they gave the users as well. Right, so workflows could be from very simple to extremely complex. This is obviously a simple workflow, but it still takes you through each step and how you actually build out each individual workflow. So if for any reason that you need workflow built for the financial, sales, payroll, project, or administration series, right, GP does accommodate workflows in those sections, and you can actually review them to see which is best suited for you. All right. So do I have any questions? That would be the end of my presentation on GP workflows.